Hey everybody, sorry I can't make it to the Drupal meetup tonight. I'll be at my daughter's gymnastics class tonight. I'll just show you a couple of things that I had a hand in, as well as some of the things that we all organized together and go from there. So without further ado, an outline here of what I'm going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the Global Nav Library sprint to create the HTML and CSS and JavaScript that we needed to create the global navigation, as well as how I had initially done it before we had discussed the possibility of turning it into a Drupal module, and then realizing that the JS itself was kind of broken, and then talking about the library that we resurrected to turn it into something that we could use for the Drupal module, and then tagging releases. It's a pretty simple thing. So first, let's talk about the global nav sprint. So when we say global nav, what we're talking about is this here. Now this is a New York State-wide navigation that is required to be on all New York NY.gov websites. It's this navigation piece here, and we had to have multiple variations of it, as you can see, unstacked versions, stacked versions, and the navigation is responsive, featuring the different sizes for screens there. So initially we had I believe it was a 1-week sprint, it may have been a 2-week sprint, to lay out the content for the HTML. Well, actually, if we take a look at the implementation guidelines here, so it was to create the code. So this is for the navigation at the top of the page, and then it's also including the footer, which is the code down here. So our sprint put together lots of smart people into a room. We came to a lot of assumptions and basically built this navigation, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Plain JavaScript, no jQuery being used in this. So we had this sprint put together, and then we needed to put it onto our Drupal websites. So my initial implementation of this was based off of using the JavaScript that came with the global navigation inside of this folder here. So using this JavaScript file and the CSS files as is. I didn't want to make any modifications to the files. So in order to do that, first I had to manually add them into my info file for my Drupal module, or I'm sorry, for my Drupal theme. So my sub theme is called OVS Zen. It's a sub theme based off of the Zen 5 Drupal theme. So you'll see here, I manually add the public safety CSS style sheet and the global nav header JavaScript. And so by implementing that into the framework, I was able to create a so we also have this universal navigation that's, I don't know if we're talking about that or not today, but it's a secondary, it's another module that actually goes along with the global header. And what I had to do in my page.tpl.php file is actually implement the code that's being used in these demos. So let's take a look at the Unstacked 5 demo. I'll increase my screen resolution here, and you'll see global nav header, horizontal unstacked. Here's our navigation toggle, all of these different things here, everything being wrapped in an H1. You'll see I actually manually entered that into my PHP template file for every single page. It's all very manual. Believe it or not, I actually did not even implement the global nav footer for my Drupal sites because it was just too hard. And I just said, forget it. I'm just going to do the navigation because that was pretty easy. So realizing again that all I wanted to do was, so this is the global nav header JavaScript. So this adds the click functionality to the menu. This does it for responsive designs as well. But realizing that all I wanted to do was grab this content here and just plop it right into my Drupal site based off of my info file. So I just wanted to add this global nav JavaScript file and just be done with it. Well, the problem was, I should say, is that the global navigation script, because it was written in plain JavaScript, there wasn't the quick jQuery function. I'll make it really big here. The $, this little jQuery document ready. So this is basically like typing document.ready function. What this does is this waits for DOM ready. So this is a shortcut for that. Now, because we're talking about Drupal here, Drupal does not load all of its JavaScript by default, unless you're using a different module. Does not load all of its JavaScript at the bottom, at the end of the footer tag. Like, you should be loading it down here. Now, because we didn't have that capability, what was happening was this is being loaded from the info file. So the info file is loading this file, but every time you'd click on a menu, nothing would happen, and you'd get an error. Well, the problem was that Drupal was loading this JavaScript file before it even hit those DOM elements, these DOM elements in the page TPL file. The JavaScript was being loaded up here, and it was saying, I'm looking for something with an ID of navigation. It doesn't exist, so I'm just going to move on. So what I ended up having to do was take the existing JavaScript that was written for the global navigation, this big long piece here, and actually wrapping it inside of a Drupal behavior. So this Drupal behavior acts like a document ready, and it gives me a behavior based off of, I can add a custom function name to it, or I'm sorry, a behavior name to it. So what I did was I wrapped all of this in here. So you'll see this begin New York State global navigation. So this right here is all of the code that was in the original file. And because we're dealing with something that only works when you have JavaScript enabled, this nav toggle, I actually manually added in the navigation toggle. So when you're looking at, hopefully I'm not going too fast here. When you're looking here at the navigation, this nav toggle will only ever work if you have JavaScript enabled. So I said, all right, I need to add that. I need to add that in there. And so I just did it with a little jQuery prepend function. Nice and simple. And using all of the roles and the IDs and classes that are used inside of the template code that we were given. And then I just give it an ID, the actual main menu. I give it an ID of NYS Global Nav so that all of these things will actually fire down here once that happens. Is that hacky? Oh yeah, very hacky. At the time, it was the only way that I knew how to do this without heavily modifying the original global nav JavaScript file. And so what we ended up doing was we found a lot of bugs in the library. So what we ended up doing was we basically resurrected this GitHub repository that had sort of been created based off of the sprint and then left for dead. That we had plenty of issues in there, and none of them were getting resolved. And so we decided that we were going to just make this repo a usable piece of code. No longer would it be a piece of recommended starting point for implementing it on your own websites. We wanted to make it something that was going to be reusable on as many sites as possible and as bug-free as possible. And you'll see there's 7 issues open right now, and we accept pull requests and people changing things up if they need to, and things like that. What we also did, and this is something I wasn't going to initially talk about because I'd forgotten about it until just now, but there's some implementation things that go on with this library itself. And so what we did was something that I thought of was I wanted to make an FAQ section on the site, but not having to manually curate it. So what I did was created a label inside of GitHub for issues called FAQ. And now what that gives us the capability to do is you'll see that all these issues are actually closed except for this one. And they're all labeled as FAQ, so we can see that there's version information. The documentation on how the menu can be configured has been I created that. The agency titles, if they have a fixed width that's too wide, this is how you can manage that. Different things like that. So it was a nice little extra piece there. Now this version information is actually very important. So what we did was we decided to add a version number to the to the JavaScript file in the library in order to be able to check when you install the Drupal module that you're using the correct version of the module or the version of the library, as well as Greg added a piece of code that actually spits out the version to your source code. So every time somebody tells me that they have a problem with global navigation, what I say is, all right, what's your site? Look at their site. And so here's a site example. This is the Trax website, and you'll see there's a code comment in here that's automatically spit out from the module that says that we are using the GitHub Global Navigation Library version 1.0.4, which luckily for us is the newest version of the library. But if you see that somebody's using this is a null value or this is a lower value and you're troubleshooting some issue, you can say, hey, your global navigation library is out of date. Update that first, see if that fixes any bugs. If it doesn't fix any bugs, then we can move on from here. But this gives us a very super easy to reference way to find out if somebody's using the right module or right library, sorry. And I think that's it for me. Resurrecting something that had basically been left for dead was a really great experience for me. Personally, I think that it was a really great experience. We used a lot of the nice communication tools. I think that you guys will be talking about those later. Slack and some email stuff, some chat, and really just keeping on the ball, and making sure that what we were doing here was going to help be able to be utilized across New York State. So with that being said, you can say hi to the kitty cat. Say hi, kitty. Meow, meow, I'm a kitty cat. She's so little. They found her in a sewer line at a high school. Some kids brought her and we saved her. Okay, so everybody have a great time. Wish I could be there. Love you all. Kisses, hugs, and everything there. Bye-bye now.